see me? Does he see me? Hello, Adam. I'm not sure if he sees me. I don't think so, anyway. Okay. Welcome to our public art education program, Horizons of Possibility, of the International Summer Academy of Fine Arts in Salzburg. I would like to welcome you here who are joined us in the Truckle House and those who are joined us online. We are here in the studio of the Truckle House and in this kind of setup of the Salzburg-based artist and architect Friedrich Rücker, who basically provided us with the studio architecture. We have here an exhibition by the Berlin-based artist Leon Kahane, who taught a class 4 weeks ago now. And I'm finally also very happy to welcome our panel here tonight, Ruangrupa and Nora Sternfeld, here with us in situ, so to speak, and Adam Szymczyk. I don't know if he can see me, but I guess yes, who is hybrid from Athens here with us. So in a way, we are kind of double hybrid. We are hybrid in the space, and we are hybrid as a format on-site and online. So welcome, everybody. And I think it's a very special moment here that we have a conversation titled Documenta as Common, and we may see it as with a question mark or we see it with the exclamation marks, but we will discuss this tonight, I guess. And I now have the pleasure to introduce you. So maybe I introduce first, as he's here with us remotely, Adam Szymczyk. Adam Szymczyk is a curator and writer based in Basel and Zurich. He's curator at large at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. He's a member of the board of the Museum of Modern Art in Warsaw, a member of scientific committee of MUDAM in Luxembourg, and a member of the advisory committee of the Contact Art Collection in Vienna, where he also taught at the Academy of Fine Arts. And he was the artistic director of Documenta 14 in Athens and Kassel between 2014 and 2017, and served as a director and chief curator at Kunsthalle Basel between 2003 and 2014, before he basically became the artistic director of Documenta 14. Welcome, Adam. Then I also have the pleasure to introduce you to Ruangrupa in person, Ade Dawama, and Isvanto Hatano, who joined us here also in situ, and they started a course a week ago for the curatorial classes the Academy offers, becoming lumbung. But I guess they will talk about this more later. So who is Ruangrupa? Everyone heard the name, but who is Ruangrupa? Ruangrupa is a Jakarta-based collective established in 2000. Most recently, it has been selected as artistic director of Documenta 15 in Kassel, which will happen next year. It is a non-profit organization that strives to support the idea of art within urban and cultural contexts by involving artists and other disciplines such as social sciences, politics, technology, media, and others. It gives a critical observation and views towards Indonesian urban contemporary issues. Ruangrupa also produces collaborative works in the form of art projects such as exhibitions, festivals, art labs, workshops, research, as well as books, magazines, and online journal publications. It also has curated, that might some of you know here in Europe, the 2016 iteration of the Zoensbeek Art Festival in the Netherlands. And last but not least, I would like to give a warm welcome to Nora Sternfeld. And maybe also with a personal note, this is actually 20 years ago almost, that's what we said, when we first met, and it was in the context of Documenta 11, where I also by the time worked for. So in that sense, we have a long history with what Documenta is, what Documenta becomes, and what it maybe not is. So who's Nora Sternfeld? Nora Sternfeld is an art educator, curator, and writer. She is a professor for art education at the Art Academy in Hamburg. From 2018 to 2020, she was the Documenta professor at the Kunsthochschule in Kassel. From 2012 to 2018, she was a professor of curating and mediating art at Aalto University in Helsinki. In addition, and I think that is also very important for this kind of conversation, she is the co-director of the Master Program for Exhibition Theory and Practice at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. And she's part of the core team of Schnittpunkt, as well as Trafokar, an Office for Art and its mediation. Welcome, Nora. Welcome, Adam. Welcome, Ruangrupa. And now I would like to give the microphone, before we start, to my co-curator, Marina Fokides, who is a curator and the founder of the magazine South as a State of Mind, and who was eventually the head of the Documenta office in Athens for Documenta 14. Welcome, Marina.
That's something of a setting. Thank you, everyone. Hi, Adam. I was the head of the office, actually, and not. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We are actually blessed with rain here in Salzburg today, and that means that we are in this small room all together. And welcome, all of you, and thank you for being here with us, and also to the people that we broadcast online and also in their next room. And thank you, Leon Hahan, for making this room for us. I have not many things to add, apart from welcome you again, and also a little bit about this kind of talk that will be on the idea of common and what is common. What is Documenta as well. This is something that we discussed many times in our team, and I'm sure you're discussing in your team. What is commoning? What is property? What is value? Who owns what? That it's all here to, and what is lumbung, of course, and what is the relationship with lumbung and commons. And then, last but not least, what is a state, and how the state governs us in many different ways. So I don't want to say more, because Nora is the one to speak about this today with Adam and with Isvaldo and with Ade. And thank you very, very much for being here with us. I'm passing the microphone to Nora. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I have a microphone.
Okay, you have. Okay, sorry.
Thank you so very much to Sophie and Marina for bringing us here in this highly engaged public program of the Summer Academy, for inviting us to discuss on the topic of the commons, which in somehow is related through your practice to Documenta, but is, as we heard, a topic that we can discuss through a question mark as much as through an exclamation mark. So, a very warm welcome also from my side as the moderator. I have the honor to moderate this discussion on this topic that addresses all of us. All of us in the sense that it talks about the commons, that it presents Documenta, the relevant recurring art exhibition that happens every 5 years in the German town of Kassel, with all of its possibilities, promises, affectivities, histories, artistic positions and valorization processes as a common. A good that is all of ours, that is not just there for everyone, but owned by everyone. So do we really believe that, or do we wish for that? Is this the case? Is it the dream? Is it a lie? Let's think about it together. With the artistic directors of Documenta 15, Ruangrupa, and Documenta 14, Adam Szymczyk, we will discuss ways under which mega exhibitions can provide collective benefit. And I was invited by Sophie and Marina to give a short introduction in the topic that is actually your topic that you brought on the table, the topic of our gathering today. So first of all, what do we speak about when we speak about a common? What do we mean when we ask ourselves if a mega exhibition can be commons or not? So I will just give a short introduction. We can understand commons. Classically, it's understood as the cultural and natural resources accessible to all members of a society. This includes natural materials such as air and water, but also cultural goods such as education, technology, and art. So already when we hear that, we realize that we live in a world in which all these commons, from air to water, from education, technology, and art, are in the very moment in manifold processes of privatization. So what should be all of ours is in many different ways taken away, expropriated from the common to become private. What does it mean for us? Historically, the terms refer to shared fields, lands, and forests that were not in private use. It can also refer to the Roman res communis that was opposed to the res publica managed by the government. Many theorists and activists, especially in urbanism and in the field of open source technology, but also in let's say, new land movement, insist in the performative dimension of the commons and propose to verbalize them so that we understand the emergence of the commons out of collective commoning practices. The activist and artist Stavros Stavridis, for example, insists that commoning practices must integrate a multitude of knowledges, discourses, practices, and know-hows for the emergence of commoning spaces. So it's not only all of ours, it's also an all of ours that we activate by practicing it. And somehow it's a commonalization, a commoning practice. And in this spirit, we could follow the thoughts of Cornelia Solfrank, Felix Stalder, and Shusha Niederberger, who speak in their book Aesthetics of the Commons about, and this is maybe interesting for us also today, an artistic practice that is not based on the individual genius, but on collaborative experimental practices that, and I quote them here, deviate from the traditional paradigms of authorship, work, originality, unquote. So we can also see today, is it possible to deviate from this in a context like a contemporary art exhibition in which in some way, through markets and discourses, all is about authorship, work, and originality. I personally would like to emphasize the material and legal dimensions of the commons related to the questions of ownership and property, because I think it is often underestimated. We often talk about commons, but we don't talk about the material reality and the juridical reality of this ownership. When we ask who owns Documenta, this question is actually related to juridical dimensions. And the same with water and air and education and culture and so on. While we speak more and more in the cultural field about shared resources and common goods, we see that at the same time, copyrights and the legal ownership of images, knowledges, art and culture is clearly organized by private corporations, cultural enterprises or brands. We can think about Google and Facebook, we can think about Airbnb, but we can also think about Getty and the Documenta GmbH. That all these entities, on the one hand, create a discourse about shared resources, and on the other hand, create juridical terms for forms of ownership that expropriate the commons and reduce them to users and visitors, whose contributions are, of course, very welcome. It's fantastic, let's share, but the ownership remains to the private entities. Now, if we take all this into account, we see that Documenta is deeply embedded in a contested terrain. And this is, I think, why you invited me to discuss this. Is deeply embedded into a contested terrain of the question of ownership of an exhibition. On the one hand, Documenta is publicly funded. On the other hand, it is managed by a context that takes care of it as a brand. All these questions were brilliantly put on the table in many ways by Documenta 14 when Adam Szymczyk asked who owns Documenta already many years ago and built a project that opened for so many different perspectives and angles to debate about economies and the possibility for a reevaluation of values. I saw the interventions of Documenta 14 as one big intervention into a reevaluation of values. And all of these questions, of course, also echo in the Lumbung project that Ruangrupa works on and around. By lumbung, Reisbahn, you mean, as you say, a collective resource pool that functions according to the logic of the commons, an accumulation of ideas, stories, labor time, and other resources that can be shared. And even Ruan in Ruangrupa means space, so all your work has always been about the collective sharing of space as a way of thwarting the powerful divisions and subdivisions of this space. So I am very honored, of course, now to be here with you and to maybe learn to think the commons differently. I propose to start with your perspectives, and then I've prepared some questions, but I might ask them or not. We will see where a commoning of our ways to relate to the commons brings us. But I would like to start with you, dear Adam. How would you actually relate to the idea of the commons in relation to your Documenta project?
Thank you, Nora, and thank you, Sophie and Marina, for this invitation, and thank you for Ruangrupa for being open to a conversation. I think that you, the members of Ruangrupa, have put the question of ownership and organization and distribution of labor in the undertaking such as Documenta at the very center of your project, and I suppose this is the right thing to do today when the privatization of spaces, projects, and in the end individual contributions is becoming a norm. And I suppose that as for Documenta 14, it will be perhaps interesting to remind a very short statement that was published somewhere between the end of the book and the sponsor's acknowledgements in both the Reader and the Day book, that were two main publications of Documenta 14. And this brief statement is called exerg, and the exerg is a kind of mark that is usually placed on the face of a metal coin, and it doesn't relate to the value or to the kind of symbolic content that is otherwise placed on the face, on the averse and reverse side, verso and recto side of the coin, but it's something from another reality. It's from the reality of perhaps those who made this coin. It might relate to those who produced the coin as a physical object. So it's a tiny mark, but it indelibly marks every coin that is in circulation, and that's why this short text that was placed in Documenta publications is titled exerg, through the comparison of a mark on the coin that is in use or in circulation. So it goes like that. Documenta 14 is not owned by anyone in particular. It is shared among its visitors and artists, readers and writers, as well as all those whose work made it happen. In 1915, Arnold Bode, together with a group of enthusiasts, realized the first Documenta in Kassel, Germany. In 1959, 4 years later, in order to perpetuate the exhibition, the city of Kassel and state of Hesse established Documenta GmbH, a limited liability company, which was recently transformed into Documenta GmbH. The acronym GmbH reads as Gemeinnützige Gesellschaft mit beschränkter Haftung, commonly translated as non-profit limited liability company. Yet, considering the cultural history of terms used in this German legal formulation, Gemeinnützigkeit should be understood as being useful, nützig, for the common, gemein, or public good, or simply useful for a community or Gemeinschaft. And Gesellschaft is not just a company or another corporate entity, but also any association, society, companionship, or crowd. Indeed, it is a multitude of individual bodies. And then there was a short comment of this understanding of the meaning of individual bodies within a project, in this case, such as Documenta. Our lives have become increasingly subjected to and governed by apparatuses of power, institutional bodies and their corresponding regimes of truth in service of nation states, coloniality, and capital, all political, judicial, disciplinary, educational, medical, military, economic, cultural, and myriad other dispositives designed to control and manage our bodies. Documenta 14 understands its role as one of exposing these techniques of governance and confronting them with an unlimited array of techniques of the embodied self. Okay, as you see, the word common is placed somewhere in the middle of this exergue, and it is directly aimed at subverting the common understanding of what the GmbH, which is the non-profit limited liability company, could mean. So we are kind of pushing the idea of Documenta towards shared ownership. And here I would say this is not only a dream or a vague possibility, but we have to understand the economy of Documenta, which consists of course, these public contributions, which are taxpayers' money allocated to Documenta through the state of Hesse, city of Kassel, and the German Cultural Foundation. But this is merely 1/3 of the allocated amount. And the other third comes directly from the income from the ticket sales, which means that each individual visitor to Documenta could be understood as individual stakeholder of something that is yet to be defined in this enterprise, rather than somebody who merely comes to look at the product that's been designed and exposed, realized, and given to the public to contemplate. Okay.
Thank you.
So this is maybe for the start.
Thank you for situating the context in your perspective and the perspective of Documenta 14 on this Documenta GmbH that in somehow governs it, manages it, and makes it possible. Now, how would you relate to the commons that has been part of your practice? I mean, since the beginning of Ruangrupa, Ade and Isvanto.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you all. Maybe a little bit background. We're practicing it all the way. You know, it's with a lot of dilemmas, of course, problems, and so on. So when we actually plan this Documenta, like we actually really ask ourselves, you know, like what is it for us? You know, what is it for us in this journey? Like we don't want to be exploited by this monsters or whatever. I never been to Documenta, like none of us actually. Only Farid been to Documenta. But for us, it's this imagination is also very important. So we thought that it only makes sense for us if we do this. That is actually Documenta is actually part of our journey. So we see it from our side rather than, you know, being curator or like being artistic director of Documenta. And we share that question all the time. What is it? What does that mean for others? I think that's also one of the way to sort of like not dismantling Documenta as a center, but like really also seeing it from others. What does that mean for others? So they only make sense for us because we just have a good school, our learning platform. So like it's really important for us to bring Documenta in our journey rather than the other way around. So, and we try to dismantle few stuff. Actually, I mean, like I have written down like several points. If you don't mind, I can go I can go detail, but maybe later on. But like first is actually, lumbung is not a theme. So we take this out from the center of our practice or our approach. So it's not a theme. It's not a centralistic theme or subject or topics or entities that everything is just actually react to it or illustrate. So rather than it's actually a mechanism, a structures, and then there's no sense that so we have to do it holistically, which is in practice how we're going to do it. So we set up a certain structure, protocols, mechanism, way of working with values. So we're setting up values, and also this is actually really interesting how, and then we see also artists and also the works differently in our research, because and then we're not seeing it as we not only see the artists are working, or like not only the artworks, but also like how they work in the locality, how they work in their own ecosystem, and so on. So these things are really changed, sort of like the idea of the whole thing will operate. And there's a lot of things that we find, of course, like we deal with a lot of stuff, because lumbung is also economic. It's not only about sustainability, it's not only storing and then distribute it or like share it collectively or collectively govern, but also it's also about, because traditionally it's also seeds. So there is idea of sustainability. So we are thinking also how to do this. So seeing our practice of our practice as well, rather than stop in 2022. But the question is like, can we think beyond 2022? Can we go beyond Documenta? Can exhibition, whatever that is, the presentation we call it, can exhibition think about beyond itself? Because most of the events just doesn't care, right? They just like very centralistic. They're really thinking about themselves and what about the all resources that been extracted. So this is actually a long harvest, a long discussion among us and also our artistic team, thinking about the economy also behind it. From basic income, we discuss about fees and so on. So I can go a bit detail if you don't mind. So we have like these three things, we call it seed money, which is actually respecting how artists are working, not only in particular present time, but also what they're doing also before, and also what might happen after. And then after that, we have a fixed production budget, and then there's a collective pot, we call it. This is actually what we put in the pot. So we have, and it's governed by Majlis, which is assembly, collectively governed as well. So we have 5 or 6 artists gather in one mini Majlis, and then they self-govern this pot. So they can do whatever by that, collaboratively, thinking about the future, and so on and so forth. So this is the mechanism that we have. Also, not thinking about only exhibition as like the final presentation. So and then we have. I think we should also think about the time. I mean, like this event are pretty fascistic 100 days, right? So an exhibition also have that really define time and space. So what about if we stretch the space? What about if this is actually a particular journey that we agreed upon, and this so-called 100 days is actually just part of it? So we are thinking also about this. So we have 2 streams. One of the lumbung interlocal, which is the only way. Also, we think that we should do this together with others that have a similar value. So this has come up with a lumbung interlocal with the 15 organizations all around the world, and then we're thinking also not only about translate our practice in Kassel, but also the question how is actually can go back to the localities, because I think that's also really important. What does that mean for Documenta, but also what does that mean for each locality? So, and then this, it's really a main question for everyone in this process or in this journey, like how to make this cycle in terms of aesthetics and also resources. So we try to stretch that the idea of time and also the idea of space. The only way to, one of the way that we think as well is actually to make Kassel local. You know, that's the only way to do it, and then it's become conversational rather than a centralistic. That's why the Ruru House come about, and then also that's the way we work. We work through the space, spending times, and so on. That's why the Ruru House we're setting up there. It's already 1 year now.
No.
It's already 1 year dealing with breathing together with people in Kassel, the initiative, and so on. So like this conversation is going on with the artists that we involve, for example. So this mutuality, it should be really created. That's the few things that we trying to sort of setting up right now. I think I'm stopped there. Otherwise, it's a bit go on the detail. I can go on later.
I think that we could hear from both of your statements that there's a strong prefigurative idea in the practice, in you practicing Documenta in somehow, what Oliver Machat would call pre-enactment. By doing Documenta, you express and practice Documenta differently. As Adam says, he's there and he says, yeah, actually I read what Documenta GmbH is about, and obviously it's not about what the Documenta GmbH thinks it is about, or how the Documenta GmbH acts it to be about. But it is about something else, and this something else, this common ownership, this revalorization of values is practiced through Documenta 14, and now, through, in your case, through a different way of doing Documenta, through a different way of organizing it, of thinking it in time and in space. This is, I think, this is what makes both of your projects very important and strong, and I think also for all of for many people. I would wanted to say for all of us, because for me, definitely, learning and unlearning contexts where something can start from which I want to go on in the future with others and so on. On the other hand, and here's my problem, and this is what I want to discuss with you, I am afraid that this is exactly what we are in somehow expected to do. We promise another understanding of the common, while the juridical and economical decisions of how Documenta functions, how it's governed, and how it will be remembered is managed and organized through an entity, Documenta GmbH, and an upcoming institute, Documenta Institute, by people who have a completely different understanding of what it is. So in somehow we work in competing understandings, a prefigurative one or a revalorizing one, a radical one, let's say, a radical commoning one on the one hand, and a bureaucratic one on the other hand. Now, how do we deal with this contradiction? Is it possible to just create within one's own Documenta universe a parallel universe? Or is it important to bring the contradiction on the table and fight and discuss and struggle? And what is your way to deal with that? And what is your way, Adam? And if you say your way, maybe you can also say why you think this is a good way, why this way makes more sense than the other one.
Okay, I'll just say a few words to let Ruangrupa continue, because I think what they just started to explain, and which is at the same time enormously complex and simple to understand, although it is an enormously complex process, and the way of organizing and a number of possibly participating entities, I imagine, is a very complex sort of meshwork of participants, hopefully to a degree open to the participants who are not invited, because the sort of regulatory function of Documenta, as of every large exhibition or any exhibition, is that it's by invitation only, and this in the first place in regards to the participating artists or cultural producers and other agents. I think it's a necessary step to think about an exhibition not as an illustration of progressive theoretical ideas or progressive ideas in general, not as an illustration, but more like a place of action. And this is difficult because exhibitions are designed within the complex that they are stemming from, as machines for displaying objects and ideas, and recently also people with their ideas, through all kinds of discursive events and sort of performative gatherings and so on and so forth. And of course one can push those formats to their extremes and invent new ones and so on and so forth, but essentially my impression is that it does not fundamentally challenge the organizational structure and ideology behind this organizational structure of an exhibition such as Documenta. So I think the practical exercise, and possibly a very large one or growing one, and as you said, Ruangrupa members thinking also about what is after this experience of your Documenta 15, is a very relevant and necessary one, and also I would say quite urgent, considering the political, environmental, and other disasters that we are continuing to face. And I must say that I was probably, I thought I was pessimistic in 2014, 15, 16, but what we are witnessing today is exceeding our expectation, and the acceleration of kind of negative development of the scenario has become very apparent, and therefore there is no time to waste, and an exhibition must become a place in which action can develop and sort of explode the format of what is given as an exhibition to be looked at. So I'm very curious to hear a little bit about, you know, which mechanisms you could put in place based on your practice in Indonesia and Jakarta, Indonesia, and elsewhere, which could, as you say, make Kassel more of a local place. So, which I understand as sort of opening up to the possibilities that are going from within Kassel and larger Kassel, rather than kind of importing some strategies only from outside and using Kassel as a display box for those ideas and strategies that those ideas might generate. So I'm interested in concrete forms of embodiment and use and deployment of the type of ideas of shared artistic practice and cultural practice and political action that you are talking about.
it's going to be go to a bit detail, but yeah, like we try to. It's interesting because again because it's not theme, so we work around it. You know, we work in a more in a holistic. That's the only way to do it, which is of course we have some challenge and so on and so forth. But it's interesting because that's our approach. That's our artistic approach. So, for example, we have this into extreme. For example, what about if one of the interlocal member think about their sustainability project is actually buying a land, and also some, for example, creating a new currency and so on. So we go even that kind of extreme into that a plan because the sustainability project is the project. So in order to do that, we have to change the whole things, and then also the relation with a lot of stuff, with the people, with the press, with funders. For example, we just to illustrate, for example, I think we all know like how this inequality of distribution of the resources in the art world. Like a big production can be produced by the artists who have either big galleries or a big support from the national funding. So with this mechanism, we actually ask them, is it possible, for example, to spare some support from this national funding to the artists that it's will be needed. So with this mechanism, we challenge them. We have several conversations with national funding, and that's actually how we negotiate. You know, like how this is possible. For example, money from Australian or Taiwanese national funder can go to the pot and will be distributed to other in the group, for example. And also several funders, like really international funding. I think there's a big movement, not big movement, like there's a movement also trying to change the relation, because it's very colonial also in the same time. It's very much into this relation of how exploitative the form is. So yeah, we connect and in conversation with some of them and really thinking like thoroughly by conversation, like really spending time with them in conversation, like how this actually can work with this. Of course, they will have difficulties in their own structure internally, but actually there's some willingness for some to go that direction, and we just have to really discuss that. And that's one thing. And scale, of course. I think scale of the exhibition, I think we are thinking about that a lot. You know, this, I think, the scale in terms of physicalities and also in terms of the communication and so on. It's very much into this mode of production, and that's how it's actually all the budgets and the resources is actually being defined. And what about if there is a different division towards the cycle that I mentioned before, rather than to produce such a bigger production in a sort of in a centralistic way. So this division of budget actually, like we really also into that. Maybe you want to add on Haruru House?
Yeah, I think
how to
just edit, jump in on the part where I think, like I say as well, that because this lumbung as we see it as not as a theme, but rather on the opposite way, so that it's more, I think, as a method of practice, which is open as well, so everyone can jump in. And why we set up a Ruru house, I think, since beginning. That's, and as well your question, Adam, I mean, like how to make castle more local in a way, I think. And of course, I think that one thing which is we found it, I mean, when we were working with initiative and local people in castle as well, I think that the relationship between the Documenta, which is already there, I mean, this mutual, they always think that Documenta, for example, as a funding body. So this at the one hand, I think that we really want to change this perception of how to work with them without any this transactional, for example, commission or whatever. I mean, like I say, between the Documenta and the people of Castle. So we, rather than, of course, we offering of how to share, for example, spaces, resources, but as well to rethink together of how to be able to sustain together, as I say, that Documenta is, as we see it as a seed, as a beginning, but we think that even Ruru House should be able to sustain even after the Documenta. So that's what we offer and to them. And okay, if you agree, then of course that we can start in thinking together. And yeah, this is, it's not easy, and maybe it's not applied for everyone there. But of course, like I think we found it that lots of young initiative, which is very much as well open-minded and really much want to work on the shared basis, for example, with us and with others. And yeah, it's just a year now, and I think that we are not really pushed to that it has to be happen, but I think naturally that, of course, which we'll see maybe in the coming years, and then how. But so far, I think that we now working with, I think, around 15 to 20 local initiative, and in a way as well, I think Ruru House and Castle ecosystem within itself in the D15 has its own independence in a way. So, but as well, it's work of course with the larger constellation of the whole holistic, as I did say, and how to think for the sustainability within the castle, but as well to relate with others, for example, with lumbung interlocals, and then with the lumbung Indonesia, for example, I think so, and with the lumbung artists. So all this, of course, in a share and mutual collaboration, which is has to be appear for the locals initiative as well. Yeah.
Can I add on commission? Just because you mentioned that word, just like come up. We have to change the commission logic. Yeah. As well, we don't use that because that's really problematic in this idea of mechanism. It doesn't work, this logic. So, and because it's bilateral, now between the event organizers and artists as creative service provider. So in the contract, for example, we change that it's actually not, it's actually more like agreement towards a value or towards a principle, which is a lumbung value, rather than between the artists and GGMBH. So it's like everyone is actually jump in so it's not only, so it's not person to person, like entity to entity, but like it's actually several entities that agree on a certain way or a certain value, and then after that, the detail will comes up. So that's why also this commission work, or like commission logic, we didn't work that way. So there is no such a thing as like, okay, we like to have this work particular in Kassel, blah, blah, blah. No, we don't have that. So it's like really about what they're doing and what they're doing in their journey, exactly like us.
And yeah, I added maybe a little bit as well in terms of governance and economic. I think for the castle, I think that for example in Ruru House we have this majelis as well, the assembly with all the locals. So I think so all the decision is not came from us. For example, from Ruangrupa and as an artistic creation, but I think we decided together to what will be happening in Ruru House, for example, which is space for them, and it's not from us as well who decided who, for example, this one or he or she or them who can be part of our member, but we decide together as well. And for the project,
there's a lot of meeting and conversation.
But, yeah, I mean, like as well in terms of economy, I think that rather than we give, for example, we give a fee or production for each local initiative, but I think we give a sheet money as what I say as well. So we did together. For example, we put some amount of money, let's say 10 or 15, and then let's talk together and how we will use this money together. And even if we have to find some funding, then let's decide. I mean, like then we share maybe how part of you need, and if you need more and I need less, or so then that's how we govern this project in Ruru House together.
And with that, actually, we know that not everyone in the art world can do that. That's also part of our research as well. You know, like it's not every artist can do that. It's not because it's more like a commitment for a journey rather than like a doing. Like making an exhibition, you know, it's also mutual. It's not like we invite you. It's not like that. It's like where is it in the face of themselves also, you know, like so it has this both ways, and then we really clearly that it's going to be kind of like a lot of meetings, spending times together and so on, you know, like sharing some thoughts with other artists and so on and so forth, and then if they're okay, and then we sometimes work, sometimes not, but that's sort of like that commitment rather than you produce things. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's now also 8 o'clock, so I think that we should commonalize our discussion and come to a more public discussion. What I could say to just sum it up to a certain extent is that I think in both of your cases you brought Documenta in your journey and not the other way around. I see both Documenta projects in somehow as a journey. At the same time we see that Documenta is bringing your Documenta in their journey and not the other way around. So this is going on at the same time. And let's see where it brings us. And this is my moment when I would like to see how this journey is somehow also discussed on a broader level. We have a discussion here in the space. I see someone, but also in the chat. So please put your thoughts, questions, remarks in the chat, and we will go for 15 minutes, step one by one. And after 15 minutes, we just gather in a kind of communalizing way everything that is said, and then Adam and Ruangrupa will have the last words about it. So first comment is here in the space.
Hi. One question, starting also from the opening of Documenta in Athens. Adam, when you opened the Documenta in Athens, you said your title was Learning from Athens, and your statement was quite strong, saying Unlearning from Athens. Ade, when you start talking about the next Documenta, you spoke about local, and your Documenta will be local. We know, or I am from the generation, that we fought so much from globalization, so much about brightening the borders, opening the borders. So now we have two curators from two Documentas, one saying learning and learning, and the other one saying global local. I understand both of your positions, but I have a problematic of the opposite statements or two opposite poles. And I would like to ask you, I mean, how can we find, is there a middle, or is always the problematic of learning and learning? Are we like, like a cadaver in our life to be the opposite? I mean, we have to be Documenta now local to understand what we try so much, the global. And if we go again local, are we going to have again the problematic of, of localization, including and excluding? I remember talking with a socialist a few years ago when the globalization started, and we're talking about what is going to happen. It's going to be big cities like London. This will be very expensive cities, what is happening now, only privileged, and they will leave the local outside. So I'm just trying to understand, or I try as an artist to understand where, I mean, I understand the different poles, but what is there any cure? Is something we can be in between of unlearning, learning, local, global? How can we embrace, especially as Adam talked about this time, that this time we have the pandemic. Let's say the pandemic in the beginning started as something very democratic. We all had it, rich, poor, Okay, the cure is different. But started that everybody can have the pandemic, okay? There's like, you can be anybody and you can have COVID. So I just want to really ask you, what can we go where it's not local, where it's not global, where it is learning and unlearning? Is this a line? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the question. Do you want to, so I mean, a translocal way of learning by learning differently is in somehow called here. Do you want to react, and who's first? Adam, do you want to start again? We were kind of called in the beginning of the question.
Well, I understood that the dimension of the local, as described in the statements of Ruangrupa, had to do more with taking the existing initiatives and sort of impulses that are present in Kassel outside of Documenta seriously, and sort of building the exhibition, or however you want to call it, also by drawing on those initiatives or energies, or however you call them, without making them a sort of object that is exhibited, but more allowing for shaping Documenta from multiple participants, and those don't have to be only local, they might be coming from elsewhere as well, but they should not be only using Documenta in Kassel as a box in which to display all those ingredients brought from elsewhere. And I think, for instance, in Documenta 12, there was an attempt to systematically include voices of local actors, initiatives, through the creation of advisory council that left quite some marks and memories and ways of looking at Documenta in the city of Kassel, which I understood when I arrived there more often through 2014. So I guess this is not a way to make a sort of to accentuate the contrast between the local dimension of Documenta and the kind of global outreach, but to work with both and to consider both as equally important.
And I can also say for Adam, because he does not answer his question, but learning from Athens was clearly the subtitle of the last Documenta, so there was clearly not a binary between learning and unlearning in this. In the very contrary, so what you addressed in your question was actually addressed in Documenta 14, that we can only learn if we change the standpoint from where we are. If we always stand in the same standpoint within these existing power relations, this is a very poor understanding of learning. So I would say in both cases, the question does not open at all from a binary, but it addresses the possibility in your case of the translocal, the possibility of a way of doing that would be beyond, or within these binaries, but differently.
Yeah, I mean, like I can say a bit about like how global we'll I see it from our side. You know, like you don't meet actually. There is no such a thing sometimes, and it's and you know it's unequal. You know, like conversation has become very very important. I think like that's what we're trying to build and sustain, because we don't communicate many times. You know, like Southeast Asia, we meet each other in Singapore. You know, like we meet each other in Europe. Like even that direct, like Indonesia with Vietnam, Indonesia with Cambodia, we have to do that in Singapore Biennale, Singapore this, Singapore that, or Japan. Like, this is totally a problematic, you know, so there is no such a thing as this global in such a way that it, like the resources still very much play in this mechanism. So with this conversation, that's why we built this. We have to build this in a way that it's not only about Documenta. This should go beyond Documenta, and we have to think that way, because otherwise we don't see it as a big thing. You know, we try not to see it as a big thing, because this is also very much a trap. We try to see it as like a small, medium, but many, and then try to stitch it and communicate to each other, rather than thinking as this is going to be something like one thing that will solve everything.
Talking about the translocal, I have many questions here now online, and I want to see if we can make them work, if we can listen to them and see if it's possible to answer, but we have to be a bit quick to have the most possible. So one is, how do you choose the artist for participation? You talked about artist group. What criteria are there? No, I think I ask this question because I think it's important. If we say commons, people want to know what do they mean, and then they have concrete questions. You know, they want to say, hey, how do you choose them? But you can go around the question or say whatever you say, but say it quick, because there are many challenging questions like that.
Yeah, we have some values, for example, generosity, transparency, interdependence, and so on. Like, and also locally anchored. Several, I forgot all of them. You can see it in the website, but like
humor
and humor as well. So how we don't choose, like we it should be they also choose us. That's one thing, and it should be mutual. And then yeah, we check that. It's a lot of conversation, and of course because we know that only a certain of practice that will, or like can able to do this as a mechanism, as a lumbung mechanism, because otherwise we're going to, yeah.
One more, and then we go back to Marina here. But one more by Hitmangurung. I'm curious to know about the ownership process of the artistic project after the time frame of Documenta 15. Will it still be named Documenta 15 or differently?
I don't understand. Sorry.
So I am curious to know about the ownership process of the artistic projects after the time frame of Documenta 15.
Or after.
After.
Will it still be named under Documenta 15?
In what sense? Like the distribution or like the...
Yeah, I asked, I think the question... Yeah,
It's
It answered with the question,
It's
the question of commissioning and denying commissioning, which usually is something then you would credit as commissioned by Documenta 15. But I guess there was an answer already to that saying we do not commission. So in that sense, we do not own. I would at least interpret this.
Yeah, and also there's a acknowledgement and announcement. It will also make a difference on that stage, and we work on that as well. And there is this a logic that we use as well, that it's actually it goes a certain time, and also it's case by case, because we work and we deal with a lot of different entities or platforms that actually also deal with a lot of people. So this we go case by case on that, someone or like some platform that produce publication, for example, it will work differently with others.
The next is Marina.
Well, I'm going to divert a little bit from this or continue. It's kind of, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. Since I have worked close to Adam and the team for early on, it's wonderful to hear some things that you're saying that we've been discussing so much as well. And somehow this also gives me a sense of Documenta in itself is something that in Greece we would call Chinese whispers. I don't know if it's international this, but somehow one Documenta fades into another, and maybe most of the learning process is for the politicians or the states in themselves to learn one Documenta from each other, but also to somehow go to the next level. If one sees the history, it somehow goes a little bit like that, and that's very positive. Now, I want to ask you, because I'm also personally interested about the lumbung definition. Of what I understand is something that it's sharing our surplus or something like that, that you would explain better. And that's interesting, very interesting, sharing our own surplus. But then again, something bugs me, and that is, what is the responsibility of the state there? We are educating it, we are sharing our surplus to help it, and I remember there was lots of also questions between us, how the state will also, will learn from this, as opposed that we don't have to share our surplus. And to this, I want also to ask how we're gonna move from somehow representation of these comments, because that's always what it happens, to actual realization of this, maybe. And one small example that Adam can elaborate on this if he wants, that I can remember of this document I had the honor to work for, was, for example, the case with Ologibe sculpture that was somehow denied or prolonged of being bought by the state or the municipality or whatever, it's like a public governance, and what then was somehow had to be bought by crowdfunding. So in a way, a little bit of lumbung. But let's go to the lumbung. If you can teach us a little bit what this lumbung somehow means in real terms.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Yeah, it's a surplus, and then also there's one value also is actually self-limitation, because you have to define. There's a lot of questions like how you define surplus. You can, it's very interesting how you define self-limitation, and it's also at the same time you have to define the greed also. So you have this limitation, and then you have to define the surplus, and that's actually what you share, and it can be different as well. So this is of course very cultural, but also in the same time we challenge that a lot in the conversation, also in this journey. On the state, that's a tough one. Can I go to the next question?
Adam, do you want to react to that? Maybe
I can see I can question from a different angle, but this is also very I can jump to the other one, which is the representation. I think actually I started with the time and space. I think that's also that's at least that what we think through the time and also through the space, to stretch it and then not to because most of the representation, it's actually on that as well, but this is a few logics that I hope you get it, otherwise it's too long, to see it that it's actually not one line, that one thing is actually go to one place, which is what we call it time and space defined as exhibition. But what about if we challenge that to go back, and then hopefully it blurs the representation, and then it's become like one whole cycle, and then it's become presentation.
But as well, I just added maybe one thing for the surplus and the share, I think, because like I did say, it's not about how you, I mean, surplus, but I think like it's as well, I think it's very much still with sufficiency. No, when it's not like when you offer and then you have to share, and then you start willing to share. But I think when you say that even you don't have much, but when you say that sufficient, and then you can start share. I mean, like that. I think sufficient is I think it's very much important as well, embedded within, which relate to sustain and of course, I mean, like then sufficiency is very much important within these days as well. And
Sophie has a question. Let's keep on the table the question of the state that was skipped, and let's take it to the last round. But now, okay, Adam, I think it's really important, this skipped point of Marina. Do you want to react to that? Because Marina says you had many discussions about it. What is what is the role of, in all this debate of the common, what is the role of the public and the private? The public, especially when you say the state.
The state, no?
Yeah, the state. What is the role of the state and what is the role of the public? Adam, it's to you. It's actually Marina's question to you.
In general, it's
Well,
not
to us.
I don't want to put Adam in any.
Now help us with this question that is, I think, really important.
What is the role of the state in relation to what?
I think the question was, can we, when we talk about the common and do all these practices, can we just leave the role of the state out of all this? Or shouldn't we address also the role of the state in this whole question of culture as a common good? And should we expect something from the state and from the public? Or what is the state and the public? Marina asks.
No, the state and the public is something else.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose the proposal of Ruangrupa has not much to do with the way the supporters or organizers, let's call them this way, and owners of Documenta, which is the city of Kassel, state of Hesse, which is in fact a German state since 1955, 1959. You know, it's not the way the German state sees the way Documenta should work yet. However, politicians learn quickly from radical idea of those who produce, for instance, exhibitions, and they turn them into, or they incorporate them as parts of their kind of political practice, depending on circumstances, of course, and depending on their hope for reaching the outcome they would like to have. So, to my surprise, but also not so surprisingly, it seems that the budget of Documenta has been increased as a result of what was announced in Documenta 14 as a deficit, which was fairly understandable. Shortage of public funding, if we consider that there were two projects, one in Athens and one in Kassel, and not one Documenta indivisible in Kassel. So in a way that our actions may have some limited influence on how things will be developing in the future, but I don't think that there is a direct conversation or communication in terms of strategy for an exhibition or for cultural projects between organizers, curators in this case of the project, such as Ruangrupa, and those who let's say allow it to happen, which is the Documenta GmbH and its stakeholders, the city of Kassel and the state of Hesse. And namely, there is one important question to ask, which is how should an exhibition developed along the lines described by the members of Ruangrupa present here, Ade and Iswanto. How should this exhibition bring the result expected by the city of Kassel and state of Hesse, which is basically a particular amount of money in the box office of Documenta 15 that should cover for approximately, I suppose, 30% of the entire budget of Documenta, next to another 30% contributed by the city, state of Hesse, German Cultural Foundation, next to one other third roughly contributed by all kinds of sponsors and funding organizations and so on and so forth. So in other words, our practice might be brutally checked at some point on account of how we fare budget-wise, and this is the moment. I think the economy is the only field in which the actual confrontation between the habits of doing things and the practice we would like to introduce can take place. So it's the economy is the most fruitful field in which to demonstrate a certain incompatibility of aims of Documenta as imagined by its organizers, the state, and the role it could play as public common that will be then supported by the organizers such as Ruangrupa. So to stage this discussion about economy, this discussion about economy would be a very important aim of Documenta, in my opinion.
Thank you, Adam. I think this was really important to add that. What I now propose is that, which is very important for me for a public gathering, is that I just read everything that is there, comments, questions, one after the other, and Sophie will have like the last just comment question, just like everyone else, and then the last words will be to Adam and Ruangrupa. You can relate, answer to whatever you want from these things. This is too many, but I want it to resonate here in the space. So just quickly, there is by Piotr Kowalik the following question. How do you negotiate the inequalities that became visible during the pandemics? I assume that these inequalities impact the potential projects, participations, travels, etc. And he continues, the question also relates to the limits of your agency. To what extent can you experiment with new distribution systems without creating a completely artificial bubble? This is one question to you. Another one by Alik Block, Gila Kolb, I know her, it's great that you're here. Thanks for the talk and the moderation about the commoning. I have a question about the local. How does this go together with the still ongoing situation of not being able to come together locally? So another question in relation to the pandemic. Then Miss Juliette asks, so in that context, local and interlocal global find a balance in the practice of mutual care and non-extractive projects cultivation on site. Kassel, local. So thanks for clarifying this. and continues, and in the region, cities involved with the onboard initiatives and artists. And is thankful for the inspiring talk and tells us that in Lumbung we trust. Sabine Breitwieser asks, how are you, Ruangrupa, dealing with the historical context of Documenta that has been established, in particular in light of the recent research on founders and curators of Documenta? So this question by Sabine Breitwieser just quickly relates to some historical research that has been done by the Historical Museum of Germany, DHM, in its recent exhibition on the history of Documenta, and that discusses history and politics in relation to Documenta, in relation to the Second World War and its continuities, Nazi continuities on the one hand, and the Cold War, the relation between the East and the West on the other hand. Very concretely, what has been discussed in this exhibition is that many former Nazis have been involved in the organization of the first Documenta, and B, the role of the Cold War has been very important in how these Nazi biographies have not been brought on the table so much, and how the world still was divided by discussion about art, abstraction, and so on. So this is the question about histories. Then many people want to say thank you to you and want to say hi to you. And last one, and then I stop with reading. Please don't write more, I won't read it. Will there also be such a great concert in the opera as it took place during the opening in Athens? Heaven Eyes asks. And Daria Kuzmic, dear Adam and Marina, thank you for the 14th Documenta. It was very inspiring. Looking forward to the next Documenta. Good luck and support for Ruangrupa, and thank you for the talk. And now the last question, Rima? No? Okay, so this is what has been said today. Also from my side, thank you, and I really want you to react to whatever you feel the need to react to from all these, I think, relevant questions and comments that we have heard. Should we again start with you, Adam? So that Ruangrupa can then have the last word?
Well, I don't think I can decide about it. It's your decision.
Yeah, please. I ask you to do it, please.
Yeah, okay. Maybe for the end, I will tell you a political anecdote from reality. 2 days ago, a Catholic bishop in Poland, and in Poland, Catholic Church is a major power, dedicated a part of his sermon to critique of the content of John Lennon's song Imagine. And probably the bishop heard about this song and its content because it was used during the inauguration of Tokyo Olympics, which I didn't know, but I found out through the reports about this bishop's statement in his sermon. So the bishop quoted specifically the lines such as, imagine no possessions, nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people sharing all the world, and the world will live as one. So these were the lines that somehow infuriated the bishop, and he tried to mount a very strange argument in which the ideas of Christianity would somehow be better than those ideas expressed in John Lennon's Imagine, that I always thought were fairly harmless and truly universal. So the question of whether we would ever live as one is still open, and I very much hope that the Documenta 15 of Ruangrupa will be one more necessary step on this path to progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Heavy load that you have put on your shoulders.
Yeah, thank you. Can I respond on the stage? Just a little bit. I mean, like, lumbung and also the other similar model it's many of them is actually a pre-modern state practice, which is I think this relation, or like this tension, I think it will be interesting also to question, like really, that's really super relevant, like how and then also the state as we know now is actually really strongly questioned. And also at the same time, it will relate to also the other, maybe about the lumbung we trust. We don't see this. We never see this as. I think it's also a big trap that we're going to think that there's going to be like one solution for all. I think that's also a big trap. I think each cosmology will bring their own really model, and hopefully the D15 will celebration of this different kind of model of cosmologies, and also how it's actually can eventually learn from each other and in a connection, rather than seeing it as like one a big solution. And yes, of course, this is going to be long. I would say this is not going to be, and just like part of the maybe respond to the other before, you know, like we don't see this as Documenta as a 2022. We're going after Documenta. We're going to go back, and we're going to deal with all the rest that we try 20 years, and also the rest of the other friends also all over the world. So like being in connection and really strengthening each other, learn each other, caring each other. I think this is one of the things that we should go beyond the 2022. And with the history, it's very interesting. 55, Germany inventing Documenta, and in Indonesia we host the Asia-Africa conference, Bandung conference.
Yes. The same year.
Same year. I think it's really very interesting how these two poles of the world seeing the world, and then also the urgency. So we see how it relates. We don't want to get in like really into a certain particular history, but yeah, we work on that, how this actually connects.
Okay, so in the same year, when a group of many of them with the Nazi history founded an exhibition with art that they called verfemt, so without showing the Jewish artists mainly. In the same time, there was a huge conference that was kind of a founding conference for the third world in another place of the world. Yeah. And the question might be for you how this could resonate and what could happen if we realize that these two things happen at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay. Totally. So let's see how all your ideas and practices, how all these strong ways of shifting perspectives also will resonate in the next years. I hope we will discuss a lot, and by the practices of commoning itself, maybe change also how we see the thing in the moment. Maybe we will see it completely differently in 5 years, in 10 years, and I hope that we will stay on this. And I'm very, very grateful that I have the chance to think about it with all of you, with you. Thank you so much, Adam. Thank you so much for Documenta. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Ruangrupa. We are all very much looking forward to what will come.
Big hug for you, Adam, from everyone in Ruangrupa.
Thank you.
Thanks for the evening.
Thank you.
All the best.